A processor, although small, is the most vital part of a computer. In this video, let's cut it open to get familiar with our tiny friend. A quick look inside the processor may leave you confused with weird dots all over the chip. These are a combination of many circuits that together are responsible for functionality of a processor. These circuits are so microscopic that it is hard to make any sense of them with naked eye. So let's take a high-level approach to understand what's inside the processor and how do they work together in combination. On a high level, a processor has three main components: the ALU, the MU, and the CU. ALU, short for Arithmetic Logic Unit, performs arithmetic and logical operations on numbers. MU, or the memory unit, stores data that needs to be processed. CU, short for Control Unit, has the control over all the operations of a processor, and so it manages when and what ALU or MU should perform. Let's understand operations of ALU, MU, and CU one by one, starting with the Arithmetic Logic Unit. An ALU takes two numbers and an operator as input and provides the output of operation on given two numbers. Consider the inputs A, B, and plus. ALU provides the sum of A and B as output. It can also perform many other arithmetic operations like subtraction, multiplication, and division, and also logical operations like AND, OR, XOR, and many more. Arithmetic operations are familiar to many because they are nothing but simple mathematical operations, but logical operations are alien to newbies. For now, let's focus on the ALU, and we would be getting back to logical operations in the next videos. So ALU is like a calculator where you input 4 into 3 and it outputs the product 12. Technically speaking, there is an ALU inside a calculator that lets us perform these arithmetic operations. Now that we understand ALU, let's jump into the memory unit. A memory unit consists of many individual components called registers. These are named registers since they register or store data. They store data like memories are stored in brain, and hence the name memory unit. The good part is that these registers are rewritable. A register is similar to an abacus where we can note a number like 43. We could also rewrite it with something like 642. With this knowledge of ALU and MU, let me introduce the control unit. The control unit is like a manager of the processor. It makes the processor follow a cycle of phases called the fetch, decode, execute cycle. It keeps following this cycle in this particular order of fetch, decode, execute, fetch, decode, execute, and so on. But there's a chance that sometimes the cycle might be faster and sometimes it might be slower. Since all the parts of processor might not run at the same speed, this creates an inconsistency. So the control unit has a clock to prevent such condition by introducing synchronization among various parts of the processor. For each tick, the processor travels the fetch, decode, execute cycle once. So there's a tick, fetch, decode, execute, tick, fetch, decode, execute, tick, and so on. The fetch, decode, execute cycle is also known as the instruction cycle because for every such cycle, one instruction is completed. But what is an instruction and where is it stored? An instruction tells the processor what to do. Instructions live in the neighborhood of the processor inside the RAM. Data in RAM resides in different cells. Each cell has an address. Let's represent the RAM with a table of addresses and data. The addressing starts from 0 and continues till the capacity of RAM. For each address, there is a corresponding data. Let's bring in the processor to understand the bigger picture of its interaction with RAM. The registers of MU are named based on the type of the information they store. For simplicity, let's bring in only three important registers from the memory unit. The program counter stores the address of current instruction. The instruction register stores the current instruction that needs to be executed. The accumulator accumulates results of all operations. Let's invite the control unit and ALU to the show and add a bus. A bus is a bunch of wires for communication between all these components. It is called a bus since the data travels through these wires. What we now have on the screen is the processor, the RAM, and the bus in a single view. Now let's see them in action. The instruction cycle starts with the tick of the clock. The fetch phase begins. Initially, the program counter is loaded with address 0. So the processor fetches the data located at 0th address of RAM and copies it to the instruction register. The fetch phase is now completed. So the decode phase begins. In this phase, the processor decodes the instruction in the instruction register and understands it. Each instruction is made up of two parts. The first part tells the processor what operation to do, and the second part tells the address of data on which this operation must be done. Next, the execute phase begins. In this phase, the processor executes the instruction present in the instruction register. The current instruction is load 5. So the processor loads the data present at address 5 in the RAM into the accumulator. Now that's the end of first instruction cycle. The clock ticks and begins the next instruction cycle with the fetch phase again. The program counter is incremented by 1. So this time the processor fetches the data at address 1 and copies it to the instruction register. Next, the decode phase begins and the processor decodes the instruction to understand that it must perform an add operation on the accumulated data already present in the accumulator from previous operations and the data present at location 6 in the RAM. The execute phase begins. The processor feeds the data from the accumulator to the ALU and also the data at location 6 from the RAM. It feeds in the add operator and the result is loaded back to the accumulator, marking the end of second instruction cycle. The clock ticks, fetch phase begins, program counter is incremented to 2, the instruction is fetched from address 2. Decode phase begins, processor decodes the instruction and makes sense of it. It understands that it must store the accumulated result back to the RAM at address 7. Execute phase begins, the data in accumulator is copied to address 7 of the RAM, and that's the end of third cycle. There are no further instructions in the RAM and the processor halts. Since the instructions are executed at every tick of the clock, and if the clock ticks for every second, we say that the processor has a speed of 1 instruction per second, otherwise known as 1 Hz. Modern day processors have very high speeds in order of gigahertz, which is a billion instructions per second. Otherwise, you would have ended up with crappy animation like this. Everything about this video was true, except for one thing. The data stored in processor and RAM does not look like what it's shown here. Instead, it looks like this. This crazy way of representing data is known as the binary number system, which is the topic for our next video.
Hey there, hope you like the video. This video is part of series called Computer in a Nutshell. If you are new to computer science, then this is the only series you'll ever need to get started. Because this series will take you on a crazy ride, starting from what is a computer, to what's inside a computer, to how each part of computer works, leading all the way up to Introduction to Programming.
To get started on this series, you can head over to my channel and dial into Computer in a Nutshell playlist. Here, you can find all the videos from this series in chronological order. You can also find links to the videos from this series in the description of every video.
If you find this video informative, please share it forward. Subscribe to our channel for more such videos. Click here to watch the next video from this series. You can also check out our previous video from here.